good morning or good evening, depending which time zone you're in. I'm Xiaodan, a faculty of the Department of East Asian Languages and Cultures, University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you if you are from UIUC. Thank you for joining us in the last week, Friday. This is a third talk of our online speaker series titled Yellow Peril Redux from Coolies, look at my background, incarceration camps, trade wars, and coronavirus project, funded by UIUC Chancellor's Call to Action to Address Racism and Social Injustice program, and co-sponsored by the Center for East Asian and Pacific Studies. Let me first introduce what the project and program are, and I will pass it on to today's chair, Professor Paul-Jacques Fu of UIUC History Department. And Professor Fu will introduce to you today's speaker, Director Myles Matsuno. So the rhetoric of yellow peril leads to the so-called—
Professor Shao, you are not sharing screen now?
No, I'm not. Oh, thank you. Okay. Back to the so-called Asian invasions in the late 19th century. The COVID-19 pandemic inspired a reinsurgence of this rhetoric and its consequences. The American perceptions of yellow peril and the racial bias and strategies of othering it has mobilized intersect with intellectual misunderstandings, international interactions, the making and lifting of legal boundaries, economic development and competitions, technological and scientific collaborations and contestations, as well as tensions between globalization and nationalism. So my project, our project, situates yellow peril in the US history and the present in a bigger context. So we regard it as a systemic racism in the US, which has been complicated by the US-East Asian relations and by misunderstandings between different cultures. So we study not only its historical moments, but also developments now, cultural expressions and social consequences. And we also rely on our research and teaching expertise and extends our relationship with community partners inside and outside of Illinois. The project started with Chancellor Jones' announcements in July 2020. I will show you slides here. Chancellor Jones announced a $2 million annual commitment by UIUC to provide support for academic research and the expansion of community-based knowledge that advances our understanding of systemic racism and generationally embedded racial disparity. Our team, this is our team, includes scholars, professors, community leaders, as well as grads and undergrads. So here I would like to thank our wonderful coordinator, GA, Ms. Yang Liu, and the extraordinary outreach partner, Ms. Michelle Zhang of the Society of Delighted Heart and GO of Asian American community in California. Oh, I have an assignment from my GA. I need to have a quick review of past events and make announcements on upcoming talks. So in the past a month or so, we had a talk by Professor Michael Kivak from National Taiwan University. His talk is titled, "When Did East Asians Become Yellow?" The video of this talk is available here. Yang, can you copy paste the links of those videos?
Yes.
Send to our audience via chat.
Yeah.
Yes. And then we also invited Justice Sabrina Shizue McKenna, Hawaii, to talk about the long history of American legal codes that discriminated against the Asians and the Asian Americans. Then on June 2nd, we will have a roundtable titled Arts and Asian Americans in a Changing Society, including panelists Dr. Jay Xu, Director and CEO of the San Francisco Asian Art Museum, Professor Xiao Zexie of Stanford, Dr. Daxia Xu, founder and owner of Qualia Contemporary Art Gallery, Palo Alto, and director Jason Finkelman of UIUC, who just opened an exhibition on Nisei on Japanese American Illinois here on UIUC campus. Then Dr. Shen Chen, co-chief curator of Royal Ontario Museum, Canada. So hope you can join us on June 2nd and on June 23rd, we will have another invited speaker. We are honored to have this commitment from Dr. Karen Kolematz, daughter of Fred Kolematz. The title is about Kolemat's fight against yellow perils, and join us on that day. Then today's chair, Professor Paul-Shek Fu, our history department professor. His work focuses on U.S.-China cultural relations, Chinese language cinema, and war and culture interactions. He is the author of China Forever, Shaw Brothers, and Diasporic Cinema, and Between Shanghai and Hong Kong, The Politics of Chinese Cinemas, and co-editor of a volume titled The Cold War and Asian Cinemas. Paul-Shek, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Sultan. First of all, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for coming today. It is my great pleasure to introduce our speaker today, Mr. Myles Matsuno. Mr. Matsuno is a fourth-generation Japanese American filmmaker based in LA. And currently, he is the head of acquisitions for the New Days Films. Well known for his skills in infusing warmth into visual images. He has won many film festival prizes. And he has been involved in the primetime television productions and also independent filmmaking. And among his recent works are a feature films with a similar titles to a Hollywood classic romance, Christmas in July. And also he has a documentary film that in fact he's going to show us today that is First to Go, Story of the Kataoka Family, which focuses on his family's experiences as what we call the prisoners without trial in the Japanese internment camps during World War II. So please join me in welcoming Mr. Myles Matsuno.
Hi, thank you for having me. I appreciate everything that you all are doing at the university, and thank you for showing my film and inviting me to come speak and share this important piece of history. I'm looking forward to having a conversation after the film, and feel free to ask me any questions that you have.
Still going, he's up to the 25, and now he's hit and hit hard about the 27-yard line. Bruiser Kennard made the tackle.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special news bulletin. The Japanese have attacked Pearl Harbor, Hawaii by air, President Roosevelt has just announced.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy.
Many years ago, my family asked me to write my legacy. I remember writing, "Where do I begin?" The FBI came unannounced, handcuffed my father. They targeted him. He was the first one taken in.
At that time, it was hard because you're Japanese, nobody would hire you.
Military authorities therefore determined that all of them, citizens and aliens alike, would have to move.
We had to go into camp with just 1 or 2 suitcases per person. And then going there, we had to close down the shade. We couldn't look out. They wouldn't let us see where we were going.
Think a desert like Topaz, and you put all these barracks up nothing but dust and dirt.
So you were separated for how many years?
Maybe about 3 years.
The American people in their righteous might will win through to absolute victory.
And this was September 14th, 1942.
And that was the first letter you got, right?
Yeah, this is the first one I got.
Hi, sorry, I'm trying not to like. Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah, I'm trying not to cry because I haven't seen that film all the way through in a bit. And give me a second, please. Be right back. And since this film has been done, like looking at the people involved and like hearing my dad's voice, and he passed last year, and it's been tough. So I'll try to get through this, but if I cry, I'm sorry. Okay. Before I get into my slides, I guess let me like wing this a little bit so I can collect my thoughts. What were some of your thoughts?
Take your time, don't worry.
Okay. Okay. Let me share my screen again with this. Okay. Can you guys see this okay? Good.
Yeah, it's good.
Okay. All right, let me. Okay. So, and you can see me okay still? Yeah, okay. So when I was thinking about, when I got invited to come speak and show this film, I was thinking about, what can I talk about? And I'm a runner, I'm a marathon runner. So I do a lot of my thinkings on my runs, right? So I was thinking about what can I talk about? And I thought about my film, and I was having a conversation with my wife, and I had a conversation about like, what if I didn't make this film? And I was thinking, there's so many opportunities I've had to be able to show this film to educate others and have these really important conversations with people that might not know much about incarceration camps. And then I was thinking about home footage and how much of my own home footage I used in this film and how it became an educational tool. So I came up with the title, Home Footage Educational Tool. And that's what I wanted to kind of talk to you all about today, as well as some facts about the Japanese incarceration camps that maybe you do know about or maybe you don't know about, but just kind of like my journey as a filmmaker woke me up to being vulnerable as I was already crying about this film, and showing with you all today. Home footage educational tool. In the background, that is what you all saw in the film. It's a screenshot of my great-grandfather, first SF Japanese prisoner, being handcuffed by the FBI. He was the first one in San Francisco to be taken right after the bombings of Pearl Harbor, which is very interesting because that means already they had been watching him. If you think about that, because they came and got him within 2 hours after the bombing. So I'll get into that stuff later, but right now I'll just get into some of how it started, just my journey. And so this is a home footage shot of my sister and me, my dad filming. And, I say growing up in front of the camera without knowing the future impact it would have on me. My father was constantly filming us when we were little. And I think that had an impact on me to realize like how important it was to be able to capture home footage and capture those moments that we can share, not just with ourselves and with our family, but with also our friends, right? And I think that it ultimately led me to, without even knowing, pursuing a career in filmmaking. And it led me to, then filming, like to me, 1996, before vlogs were cool and popular. I guess I was doing that, just being dumb, looking around and doing things and filming my brother splashing his face with water. So it led me to really like pick up the camera and start to really capture those moments that I now get to, share with my family. And so, home footage has always been very important to me, and I preach that all the time. And so the inspiration behind this story, I think this picture is really cool. It's a picture of my grandpa, my grandma. My grandpa looks like a Japanese James Dean with a cigarette hanging out of his mouth, and my grandma looks so beautiful, and I just love this candid photo of them. But the inspiration behind this story, I didn't know, sadly, I didn't know much about the camps. I'll show another slide, but it wasn't something that was discussed in my family. And my father, this is my father. He had the print, which he had my aunt find the original print and had it. She worked at the newspaper at the time, and he had it blown up, and then he put it on his wall as kind of like inspiration for him. And growing up, I always saw this poster. This printed out one sheet, but I never really took the time to really read it in high school. Yes, I glanced over it, and I knew about the Japanese incarceration camps, but not something that was largely discussed in my family until, I started asking questions. And then once I found out like what it was, and you kind of take that and you relate that to your own family, and you realize what happened with your own family, you start to like, I guess, at least for me, I started to like really, and this sounds bad, but I started to really like want to learn more about it, right? I want to know what happened to my family. I wanted to know like what happened to all other Japanese and others that were also incarcerated at this time. And so I started digging in and I started learning more about the subject, but I was also very scared to touch the film. And this is also something that it took me a long time to make. And I wanted to eventually make something that I can pass down for my family. But at the time, I was still making films. I was still very active in storytelling. And I think that for me, it would, put you in a vulnerable spot to be able to show your story and to be able to let it out into the world. But the time, that was not my goal. My goal was to just tell something proper for to pass down from my family generation to generation. This is just a slide of my grandma that I found of the old 8mm footage when she was a young girl, and made this poster for this speaking engagement. And I write, the camps were never taught to me, and growing up in high school, that's very true. It was very much glossed over in the history books, and it wasn't really taught to me. And not many professors knew anything about the subject. Even my history professors, when I would ask them questions about it, it was just like, oh yeah, it's like we put America put the Japanese in incarceration camps. Yeah, it was bad. Blah 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 blah. But it's like, anyway, back to Germany, or let's get back to America and how we saved the day. And growing up in high school, it's like, okay, well, what you're teaching me, or I guess those are the most important things. So sadly, all these things I had to really teach myself. And so, it took a long time for me to be able to make this film, to be able to put myself in a vulnerable spot, and also go to all the museums, teach myself about the subject, and then eventually get my grandmother to be in front of the camera and get her to participate in, talking about something that was really hard for her to maybe discuss at first. And it took me a long time to gather VHS tapes, and took me a long time to gather just the proper footage that I would need to be able to do something like this, just to have something to be able to pass down for my family from generation to generation. So the film, like I said, it took a long time, but I started in 2015 having those initial conversations, and I didn't finish it, or 2013, sorry, and then I didn't finish it until 2017, which I got to have a premiere to be able to show it in the city in San Francisco where everything went down at the Nichi Bay Film Festival. That was where the premiere was, and I got to invite my grandmother, and I got to invite my Aunt Toshi and a bunch of others that are sadly no longer here with us, but they got to go to the premiere and it was packed out. And then that's when I really realized that, this film is bigger than just family footage, like a glorified home video. It's something that could really educate and be shown to students to relate on maybe a different level than other films are about the camps, because there was no agenda besides having something to pass down for my generation. So I have a film that is also kind of shows like some of the good that comes from the bad. I just showed it to you. You just saw the film, so you can kind of pick some of those things up, but I'll talk about some of those things. But I wanted to also talk about some of the things that I didn't discuss in the film, that I either found later, newspaper clippings of the arson, which I didn't add to the slide, that happened with the Aki Hotel. But I was thinking about what could I share with y'all that, I don't talk about in the film, that maybe you don't really know, or maybe it's not talked about much. And so I came up with 5 facts that people don't really discuss. And here's some 5 facts. And it's while most Japanese Americans were released from incarceration in 1945, some individuals continue to be detained for years afterward, including those who are deemed disloyal by the government. 2, after being released and depending on the restrictions, Japanese can go back to the West Coast immediately after the camps were closed. My family ended up going to Chicago, and some others ended up staying in the camps because they had no place to go. So when they lost their home or they lost other belongings, no one could take care of their house. We were very fortunate. I say we, but my family was very fortunate that the caregiver of a hotel was able to watch over, and we were still able to make payments that I found from records that I had got from the National Archives, which I applied for on my family. And so, it's really sad that, that's something that's not talked about, is that it wasn't just after the camps, after the war ended, and they're allowed to let go. It wasn't just like, oh, let me go back home, back to where it was. No, it's, I talk about they got a $25 train ticket and a one-way ticket back to wherever they wanted to go. But number 3, the Japanese were not the only ones incarcerated at this time. The Italian Americans, German Americans, German and Italian nationals, and the Latin Americans of Japanese ancestry. That's something that's not really discussed much. Although they were a very smaller group of people that were taken, they weren't, compared to the Japanese, they were also incarcerated at this time too. And then the other one is, in order to gather information on the Japanese community, Roosevelt sent Curtis B. Munson. He was from Chicago, and he came back with the report that the Japanese didn't pose a threat. And it's also important to note that no Japanese at this time was proven guilty of anything, and so the report is now called the Munson Report. And, after he returned and had this report, it was largely dismissed and kind of ignored. And then the other was the last one. My last point is number 5. After the camps were closed, Japanese Americans were given $25 and a train ticket to their pre-war homes, which in many cases had been confiscated or sold. And then a lot of people do know this, that President Ronald Reagan signed the Civil Liberties Act, which he apologized for everything that happened. He gave Japanese $20,000, any surviving Japanese American who had been incarcerated at this time. And I have a lot of other facts too, but I thought that, those were just some that I should just touch on really quickly. And why this story matters, I'll just read off this. Fighting for social justice issues is on the rise now more than ever. are taking control and standing up for what's right, the Japanese incarceration camps is a part of American history that's crucial in educating others on what happened to the Japanese and injustices that were brought upon them. I believe it's also important to educate and not attack. I believe that's very, very important. We must try to relate and meet people where they're at so they can eventually get to where they need to be. It's how change and progress is made. We need to humanize the issue. I wanted to tell a story that was raw, honest, and true, coming from those who lived through it. What my family told me without an agenda besides telling their stories, telling their own stories. What came from this was something that I was able to connect to many different audiences throughout the country, and those who also may deal with the same issues of immigration, segregation, racism, and distrust in the American system. And then I put a quote that you heard it in the film. My aunt's talking about, I met my husband in the camps, and I tell my children, if it wasn't for camps, you wouldn't be here. And it's such a positive outlook of something that happened so bad to my family and to many others. But just to touch on how the story has impacted and why this story matters is, for me, I've shown this film to K through 12, to students at the graduate level, and a lot of people tend to relate with this film, especially families that deal with immigration, segregation, and all that stuff. I think that I can give you a recent story. A couple of years ago, I showed this film at inner city school in Los Angeles, and it was predominantly Hispanic, and probably all of them were Hispanic. And, we did a Q&A afterwards, and one of the kids was talking about how his family came over the border in Mexico. Now he's first generation, how much he could relate to this family, to my own family's journey, and how I was able to humanize the issue to be able to connect with him and show something that was vulnerable and inside of like what my family may go through, because his family was going through the same thing. And I've had countless things like that across the country just talking to me about like how, first my grandma steals a show of how she was hilarious and how, she's just such a great person to film, which wasn't, she was hesitant at first, but after the first hour, she started directing me on what to say and what to do. That's my grandma. And so it's been great to be able to use this as an educational tool that goes beyond, Asian studies and American history. And so, yeah, I'm very grateful for that. And so here is, I want to share a picture with the Aki Hotel of what it looked like back in the day in San Francisco. I don't know who those two kids are down there. And like I mentioned earlier, I applied for the National Archives and Records Administration to see if I can gather anything on my family. And I thought that it took about 6 months. I thought, maybe I'll get like 4 or 5 pages, but I actually got 148 pages of just documents of letters that are in Letters to Be Free, information that was gathered on Ichiro, everything from dental records, from bank records. And I thought it was pretty crazy that the government had all this stuff still, and it was able to use this to help tell and craft the story as well as write a feature narrative that I wrote on this story. And so I have these documents, and I bring them whenever I speak in person too, so people can go through them. But I just wanted to share a quick little, snippet of something that I just had lying around. And then I actually found, this is a pretty cool slide story, is I actually found the original paper. I can't believe I had my facial hair looking like that that's funny. But I actually found the original newspaper on eBay, which I thought was pretty wild. I'd been searching for a long time. And so now this hangs up in my house. Like my dad had a printed copy of it, and I have the original copy of it, frames. And I'm standing in front of where the hotel used to be in San Francisco. So took a picture of it there and pretend like I was reading it. And not my last slide, but something I did want to talk to you all about, and I know I'm running out of time, is the importance of your own story and legacy, and just how important that is, because, without me me being vulnerable and telling my own family legacy, I was able to impact so many other people. And it's so important to be able to do something like that, be an advocate for what you need, what you believe is right, what you need to stand up for. And for me, I never would have imagined that this film and just showing home footage and interviewing my grandma and just having something I can pass down for my family would be able to impact so many others. And I think that I just wanted to encourage any of you that are thinking about doing something along the same lines of whether it deals with pictures or whatever, to maybe take that step, and you might be able to impact others as well with your own story, because we all have our own journey and we all have our own story. And so, yeah. And then there's a couple other slides, and I wanted to end with this. I too have lived a life of shiawase, and that means happiness or very fortunate. And my grandma said that in her legacy letter, that her mom also said. And I thought that was fascinating, after everything she had been through and everything that their family had gone through, had their rights stripped and taken away. She looks back at her life and she says, I've lived a good life, and I think that's an important outlook as well. And then my last slide is Asian American history is American history. And I think that is very, very important, because very much dismissed as not American history, I believe. And I just wanted to end with that, is that Asian American history is American history. So, thank you. And sorry if I just kept speaking way too fast. I was looking at the time go by and I was like, oh no.
Okay, thank you so much. I watched this film a couple of times. I should say that I really admire this movie, and I admire your skills in getting your grandmother and other relatives to talk. It's not easy. Getting older people to talk about things they didn't really want to talk about. This I always try to do it myself too. I'm asking people to talk about their life in occupied Shanghai, and all these things. So I understood your skill. I should say that I think the film is great. It's a very warm, touching movie. Very well edited. Amazingly.
Thank you.
Well, and in fact, after I watched this film, I show it to my class too. I teach a U.S.-China relation this time, and I agree with you completely that Asian American is in fact is a U.S. history. And instead of I'm asked to ask question to you, but instead of asking question, I just want to share with you my reaction to the film, and also some reaction of my student when they watched the film too. I think the great thing is that we really been warm and touching, and then I could understand. I'm sorry that it makes you become you even yourself you cry for things sentimental, but I can understand why. Unlike most of the stories of films about these race-based experiences of Japanese Americans, they usually were filled with anger and bitterness about this experience. This film is a little bit different, especially with the second part of the film. The soft piano music really enhanced the whole tone. So I think only see two parts. The first part of it, we get upset and angry along with your family about that your great-grandfather or great-great-grandfather being taken away as a community leaders with no reason given out to him. And we're also angry about, they take him to a desert with all the so cold and all the things, like other things. But then to a second part, I just asked that, because it seemed, as you say that too, your grandmother, she's just adorable, really. She's so beautiful. And she's really amazing. I watched the film several times, just want to look at her. And she's beautiful, and she's looked like a sage, calm and wise. And it seemed to, and she always stressed that, and also along with her sister-in-law, that they are good and they are bad. So it is tough for the old folks, but it is fun for the young folks. Maybe from her perspective, I don't know, but then,
Right.
but again, and then so there's good and bad together. And when compared to most other stories that we have read, I'm kind of maybe asking or sharing this view. Did they really want to say that, yeah, the past is bad, we should remember, but don't dwell on it? And so it keeps things in perspective. So I don't know, this is what you try, especially when you in the epilogue, you also say that your grandma, she's so pretty. She say that, like, so funny that her husband uses $300 first to buy a car before using money to marry her. It's so funny. And I think the whole class broke into laughter, but I show it to the student. So it's the same way as an analogy to the whole thing. So it means can we say that it's bad, but don't dwell on it. We are part of the whole history, US. Let's just live through it. So I just want to share this with you and want to hear your comments, and as a way to open up conversations today about your great film. So is it that to keep things in perspective? Don't like other story or thing. Don't be too bitter, angry with the past, but just go through it.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. She very much had the mindset, and so did Ichiro. It's like, that happened. Yes, it was very, very bad. And we talked about this off camera. So I was like, aren't you upset? She's like, yeah, of course I'm upset about this. Of course, like, Toshi and everybody is upset about it, but it happened, and we can't just live our life thinking, and otherwise we can't move forward. And my grandma was very wise like that. So, and I think that a lot of Asians are very resilient and very much like, let's just keep moving forward. Like, let's just make things better. Right. And so that was what her mindset. And also to, you're talking about how my grandma was just very warm and funny on camera. Like, there's so many behind the scenes footage that I have of her telling me, like, she's just complaining, but like she's joking at the same time. Like, she's like, I'm filming her, and after the first day of filming, I'm getting like B-roll shots or whatever. She's like, gosh, it's so hard being an actress. Like, she's like, I just have to keep doing this and this. And then she's like complaining on the camera, and I have all those footage. It's just so funny. Or I'd talk to her and ask her a question, and she's like listening. She's like listening and listening. She's like, okay. And it seems like she got it, and she'd be like, okay, what did you say? And it's just like, so we had so many moments like that, which are so great. And I have those memories that I can always share. But no, to go back to what you were saying, yeah, you're absolutely right. And you're spot on. And how I envisioned in making the film is, I was making and I was like, this is very sad. Like, I don't want to just always show the sad things and get people angry. Like, because there were so many moments, as you saw in the film, where there were good times. They say, yeah, it was bad for the older ones, but better for the younger ones. It wasn't mean it was good. It was just like there were kids making friends, playing, like what kids do at school on the playground. And so they're constantly just with their friends that they were making. And that's just how they viewed it at the time. And, those were just the kids, and they didn't know what was really going on with the gravity of everything.
Yes, Myles. I was told to read the question to you right away. So let me read them to you, the questions.
Okay.
One is from Guo Bingji. He said, thank you so much for your screening and talk. Toshi in your film is at the same time very angry with the injustice in the incarceration camp and suing the old man, and grateful to meet her husband there. It's the same thing. So how do you understand these profound and seemingly contradictory emotions? I think similar to what we just discussed, but how do you think it speaks to both the family history and the national memory?
Sorry, I'm having a hard time. I can't see the questions. It'd be better for me if I could.
Okay, let me read you again. Maybe that. So, how do you understand these profound and seemingly contradictory emotions? How do you think it speaks to both the family history and the national memory?
In a national memory?
Yeah, that's what he wrote. He or she.
Yeah, I'm having a hard time kind of understanding what they're trying to ask me as a national memory. Sorry.
Okay, let me read again. Thank you so much for your screening and talk. Toshi, in your film, is at the same time very angry. Toshi is very angry with the injustice in the camp, like shooting the old man, but grateful to meet her husband there. Yeah, so I mean, similar to what we just talked.
Yeah, it's very similar to what we are just talking about. Like, how do I understand these profound and seemingly contradictory emotions? You know, I mean, I think that people are going to think about them the same or different in different perspectives, right? But for me, I was just like, so with that footage that was shot in like 1991 or I don't remember what the date exactly was. So for me to watch all that stuff and see how angry she was about a lot of those things, and then talk to her in real life, which I didn't film, you can see how her mindset kind of changed as she got older as well, right? Because back then it was like really still fresh on her mind. But I just understand it as her that's just what she was telling me, that's just what she was saying. And I just took what they said and put it onto what came on to the film.
Yeah, okay. There are also two, not questions, but just compliments. One is from Dave Wusuman. He said that, no question, but thank you so much for sharing your family story with us. A lovely tribute to them. Even if they are no longer with us, well done. And the next one is Hong Ye. Said that thanks a lot for the encouraging and inspiring work. The history is speaking itself right now as we speak. I encourage that we embrace our past and present and work to make an impact with all these from a bigger picture and for greater good. And then is a question from Yan Zhu. Thanks for sharing your story. It is a very touching story, and the documentary flows like a poem. Any tips on storytelling to make social impacts? Social impacts in terms of turning our personal stories into a sharing experience so that we can form a stronger bondage between individuals. These are all the questions.
Yeah. Okay. In terms of, I guess I can come at this from two different angles. One from being a head of acquisitions at New Day and what we look for when it deals with social issue films, and just also coming from my own personal. But I think that the biggest impact you can make with a documentary or film is just make something that, and this sounds cliche, make something that is honest and true, and do not try to think about your audience, but don't try to force an agenda that isn't there. Does that make sense? Don't try to force something that might be a stretch. Just try to make something that what you have and the story that you want to tell, and it's something that you're passionate about. If it has to deal with your own family history, has to deal with something, think about that, think about them, and think about don't think about, and this is kind of contradictory to what I guess you want to do as making a film with social impact, but think about just think about what you're creating in the moment, and try not to think about, will this group accept the film? How do I make a social impact here and here and here and here? Because you can get lost, and that all goes into what you're creatively trying to tell. So that's just one step that I would say, if you are trying to pursue and using personal stories for social impact, that's something that I would strongly suggest doing. Is stay grounded with your own ideas and your own gut of what impact could be.
Yeah, these are all the questions and comments. Again, Myles, thank you so much for showing us this great film and giving us all these things too. So Saudan, maybe you're the one now who to.
Thank you so much, Myles, and also thousands of thanks to Pershek for your wonderful comments, reflections, and your Q&A leadership. Is there another question there? Yes, we have a question actually from Director Jason Finkelman, who will be on our round table on arts and.
Oh, yeah, I just saw it right now. Do you want me to
Yes.
read it right now or too late?
Yes, please.
Okay. I just come out here the question by Jason Finkelman. As you learn more about your great-grandfather, Ichiro Kataoka, and the history of the Aki Hotel, how did your father react to you sharing this history?
Yeah. Thank you for that question. He was beyond, he was beyond proud that I made a film like this. And B, he learned so much more about just everything that happened because I went into making this film, and he didn't know his grandpa that much. My great-grandfather, he passed at a young age. So he has very small memories of him, just being at the house or whatever. So for him, it was a huge learning experience for him as well, because, my father, I would bounce things off of him and say, hey Dad, how does this feel? Did you know this happened to Ichiro? And he was like, he had no idea. When I applied for the government records, he was blown away by those as well. So yeah, he was just floored, and he learned a lot.
Okay, Myles, there's also another comment here from Hong Ye. He said that might well reflect a specific type of kindness under hypocrisy, bracket, making one suffer and then let them live, bracket, that has been in propaganda since long. That's what the comment. Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's all the comments and questions for you, Myles.
Thank you, Prashik. Thank you, Myles, and thanks to all our audience. And just one more reminder, please remember to join us on June 2nd. And I hope Myles can come back with this group of arts and artists, experts. Okay, thank you again. A wonderful talk today. Thank you all.